At Mother's Day lunch, my son saw me wearing my torn coat. "Mom, why don't you buy new clothes with the $5 I send you every month?" he asked. I lowered my eyes, embarrassed. "Son, I have to choose between buying my medication or paying my rent." He went pale. At that moment, my greedy DIL pretended to fall down the stairs. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Daphne, and at 69 years old, I thought I had seen every kind of heartbreak life could offer. I was wrong. The morning of Mother's Day started like any other Sunday. I carefully chose my best outfit from the small closet in my studio apartment. A navy blue dress I had owned for 15 years, paired with my winter coat. The coat had seen better days, with small tears near the pockets and frayed edges at the sleeves, but it was the warmest thing I owned. As I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, I tried to ignore the way the coat hung loose on my shrinking frame. The medication for my arthritis had killed my appetite, and grocery money was always tight. I applied a thin layer of lipstick, the same shade I had worn since Dean was a boy, and practiced my smile. Today was about celebrating, about being grateful for having a son who cared enough to invite his old mother to lunch. The restaurant Dean had chosen was called Bella Vista, one of those upscale places with cloth napkins and waiters in crisp white shirts. I arrived 10 minutes early, as was my habit, and waited in the lobby. The hostess, a young woman with perfectly styled blonde hair, kept glancing at my worn coat with barely concealed judgment. Dean arrived exactly on time, looking handsome in his charcoal suit. At 43, he had inherited his father's strong jawline and my dark eyes. Behind him walked Elowen, his wife of 5 years, stunning as always in a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her auburn hair cascaded in perfect waves, and her makeup was flawless. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom," Dean said, giving me a quick hug. His embrace felt stiff, formal, like he was hugging a distant relative rather than the woman who had raised him alone after his father died. Elowen offered a tight smile that never reached her green eyes. "Daphne?" she said with a slight nod, her voice honey-sweet but cold underneath. "You look comfortable." The way she said comfortable made it clear she meant something else entirely. We were seated at a table by the window, with pristine white tablecloths and crystal water glasses that caught the afternoon light. I felt out of place among the other diners, who were dressed in clothes that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in 3 months. "How have you been, Mom?" Dean asked as he studied his menu. "I hope you're taking care of yourself." "I'm doing fine, sweetheart," I replied, the lie coming easily after years of practice. "Just grateful to spend time with you both." Elowen was scrolling through her phone, barely acknowledging my presence. Her nails, I noticed, were perfectly manicured in a soft pink shade that matched her designer handbag. Everything about her screamed wealth and privilege, a stark contrast to my worn hands with their short, unpolished nails. The waiter approached our table, a young man with an eager smile. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can I start you off with some appetizers? Our lobster bisque is particularly popular today." Dean glanced at the menu. "That sounds perfect. We'll take 3 bowls of the bisque." I quickly scanned the prices and felt my stomach drop. $28 for a bowl of soup. I hadn't spent that much on food in 2 weeks. "Actually," I said quietly, "I'm not very hungry. Maybe just a dinner roll." Dean frowned. "Mom, it's Mother's Day. Order whatever you want." "I'm really not hungry," I insisted, avoiding his eyes. The truth was, I couldn't stomach the idea of him spending so much money on me, especially when I knew how that money could be better used for my mounting medical bills. Elowen finally looked up from her phone. "She's probably watching her figure," she said with a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "Good for you, Daphne. Self-control is so important at your age." The comment stung, but I said nothing. I had learned long ago that responding to Elowen's barbs only made things worse. Dean ordered the bisque for himself and Elowen, while I sat with my dinner roll and water, trying to make it last. As we waited for their food, Dean began telling me about his latest business deal. something involving real estate development that I didn't fully understand, but tried to follow anyway. The profit margins are incredible, he was saying, his eyes lighting up the way they did when he talked about money. We're looking at a 7-figure return if everything goes according to plan. Elowen leaned forward, suddenly interested. 7 figures? Really? Conservative estimate, Dean replied with pride. Could be more if the market stays strong. I smiled and nodded, happy to see my son succeeding even if I didn't understand the details. He had always been ambitious, even as a little boy. I remembered him setting up lemonade stands and carefully counting his earnings, always planning his next venture. The waiter brought their soup, and I watched as steam rose from the elegant bowls. The smell was divine, rich and creamy with hints of herbs I couldn't identify. My stomach rumbled quietly, but I pushed the sound down with a sip of water. It was then that the waiter noticed my coat, which I had draped over the back of my chair. A particularly noticeable tear near the shoulder was clearly visible under the restaurant's bright lighting. "I'm sorry," the waiter said hesitantly, "but would you prefer to check your coat? We have a coat room in the front." Dean looked over at my coat for the first time that afternoon, really looked at it. I watched his expression change from casual interest to confusion, then to something that looked almost like embarrassment. "Mom," he said slowly, "what happened to your coat?" I felt heat rise to my cheeks. "It's just old, sweetheart. Still keeps me warm." But Dean was studying the coat more carefully now, taking in the frayed edges, the small holes, the way the lining was starting to separate. Then his eyes moved to my dress, noticing for the first time how loose it had become, how the fabric was worn thin in places. "Mom," he said again, and this time there was something different in his voice, something that made Elowen look up from her soup with sharp interest. "Why don't you buy new clothes with the $5,000 I send you every month?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I felt the blood drain from my face as every eye in the nearby tables seemed to turn toward us. Elowen had gone perfectly still, her spoon halfway to her mouth. "Son," I whispered, my voice barely audible, "I have to choose between buying my medication or paying my rent." Dean went pale, his face completely white except for 2 spots of color high on his cheeks. "What do you mean? I send you $5,000 every month. I've been sending it for 3 years. The words hung in the air between us like a sword about to fall. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, could hear the blood rushing in my ears. 3 years. He had been sending money for 3 years, and I had never seen a penny of it. "Dean, I started to say, but I couldn't finish the sentence. I didn't know how to tell him that I had no idea what he was talking about, that I lived on my small Social Security check and nothing more. That's when Elowen suddenly gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Oh!" she cried out, loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. "Oh, I feel so dizzy." She swayed in her chair, then stood up unsteadily, one hand pressed to her forehead. "I think I'm going to." And with that, she collapsed beside our table, her body hitting the floor with a dull thud that seemed to echo through the suddenly silent restaurant. Dean immediately jumped up, rushing to his wife's side as other diners turned to stare. "Elowen, honey, can you hear me?" The manager appeared as if from nowhere, kneeling beside Elowen while someone called for an ambulance. I sat frozen in my chair, watching the chaos unfold around me, but my mind was racing with one terrible thought. $5,000 a month for 3 years. Where had it gone? And why did Elowen choose that exact moment to faint? The ambulance ride to St. Mary's Hospital felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. I sat in the back, watching the paramedics check Elowen's vital signs while Dean held her hand, his face twisted with worry. She had regained consciousness shortly after the fall, but complained of dizziness and a headache. "Her pulse is steady," one paramedic told Dean. "Blood pressure is a little elevated, but that could be from the stress of the fall. We'll run some tests at the hospital just to be safe." Elowen's eyes fluttered open, and she squeezed Dean's hand weakly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I ruined Mother's Day." "Don't you dare apologize," Dean said softly, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "You scared me to death." I remained quiet in my corner of the ambulance, my mind still reeling from our interrupted conversation. $5,000. The number kept circling in my head like a vulture. Where could that much money disappear to each month? I lived in a studio apartment that cost $800 in rent, bought generic groceries when I could afford them, and rationed my arthritis medication to make it last longer. At the hospital, Elowen was wheeled into the emergency room while Dean paced the waiting area like a caged animal. I found a chair in the corner and watched him, remembering how he used to pace the same way as a little boy when he was nervous about school presentations. "Mom," he said suddenly, turning to face me. "We need to finish our conversation from the restaurant." My heart started pounding again. "Dean, maybe this isn't the right time." "No, it is the right time." He sat down beside me, his voice urgent. "I need to understand what's happening with the money I've been sending you. I transfer $5,000 into your account on the 1st of every month. I have the bank records to prove it." I stared at him, feeling like I was in some kind of nightmare. "Sweetheart, I only have one bank account, the same checking account I've had for 20 years. I get my Social Security deposited there, and that's it. I haven't received any other money." Dean pulled out his phone, his fingers flying over the screen. "I'm looking at my bank statements right now. March 1st, $5,000 transferred to account ending in 4739. February 1st, same amount, same account. January." He looked up at me, confusion written across his face. "Mom, what's your account number?" With shaking hands, I reached into my purse and pulled out my worn checkbook. 8264, I read from the bottom of a check. Dean's face went white again. "That's not the account I've been sending money to." The waiting room suddenly felt like it was spinning around me. I gripped the arms of my chair to steady myself. "Then whose account?" "Mr. Hartwell?" A nurse appeared beside us. "Your wife is stable. The doctor would like to keep her for observation for a few hours, but all her tests came back normal. You can see her now." Dean stood up immediately. "Thank you. Mom, we'll figure this out, okay? After I check on Elowen." I nodded, but as he hurried toward Elowen's room, my mind was racing. Someone had been receiving $5,000 a month that was meant for me. Money that could have paid for my medication, for proper food, for a winter coat that didn't have holes in it. An hour later, Dean emerged from Elowen's room looking exhausted. "She's resting," he said, sitting back down beside me. "The doctor thinks it might have been a reaction to stress or low blood sugar." "Is she going to be all right?" "She'll be fine." He rubbed his temples. "Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." I looked into his eyes, the same dark brown eyes I had looked into when he was a scared little boy afraid of thunderstorms. "Of course. Have you been lying to me about your financial situation? About the money I've been sending?" The question felt like a knife to my heart. "Dean, I would never lie to you about something like that. I had no idea you were sending money. If I had known, don't you think I would have called to ask why it wasn't arriving?" He studied my face for a long moment, and I could see him trying to decide whether to believe me. Finally, he pulled out his phone again. "I'm going to call my bank right now. Something is very wrong here." While Dean talked to his bank, I sat in the uncomfortable waiting room chair and tried to process what was happening. Someone had been stealing from me for 3 years. Stealing money that was meant to help me survive, meant to keep me from choosing between medication and rent. "The account belongs to someone named E. Hartwell," Dean said when he hung up. "They can't give me any more information over the phone, but they confirmed that $5,000 has been transferred to that account every month for the past 3 years. E. Hartwell." My blood turned to ice. "Dean," I said slowly, "what's Elowen's maiden name?" "Morrison. Why?" "And her middle name?" Dean paused, thinking. "Elizabeth. Elowen Elizabeth Morrison. She kept her maiden name professionally, but legally she's Elowen Elizabeth Hartwell now." His eyes widened as he realized what I was suggesting. No, that can't be right." But we both knew it was right. The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. "She set up the account," I whispered. "She's been taking the money you meant for me." Dean stood up so fast his chair nearly tipped over. "That's impossible. Alawan would never. She has her own money, her own career. But even as he said it, I could see the doubt creeping into his expression. I could see him thinking back over the past 3 years, remembering things that might not have seemed important at the time. "Dean," I said gently, "when did you start sending the money?" "Right after Alawan and I got married. She was the one who suggested it, actually. She said you were too proud to ask for help, but that she could see you were struggling. She helped me set up the automatic transfer." My heart broke for him as I watched understanding dawn in his eyes. The woman he loved, the woman he had trusted with his financial accounts, had been stealing from his own mother. "We need to go to the bank," Dean said, his voice hollow. "I need to see the records in person." "What about Alawan?" Dean looked toward her room, his jaw tight. "The doctor said she needs rest. She'll be fine for a few hours." 30 minutes later, we were sitting in a sterile bank office across from a sympathetic manager named Mrs. Chen. Dean had brought his identification and authorization forms, and Mrs. Chen was printing out 3 years' worth of transaction records. "Here we are," she said, sliding the papers across the desk. "Every transfer to account ending in 4739, owned by E. Hartwell." I watched Dean's hands shake as he flipped through the pages. Transfer after transfer, month after month. $180,000 over 3 years. Money that should have changed my life, should have given me dignity and security in my old age. "Mrs. Chen," I said quietly, "what would we need to do to report this as fraud?" "Well," she said carefully, "if the account was opened fraudulently using your information, that would be a criminal matter. But if Mr. Hartwell authorized someone else to receive the funds, even if that person misrepresented their intentions, it's fraud," Dean said flatly. "I authorized payments to my mother, not to my wife. This is theft." Mrs. Chen nodded sympathetically. "I'll need to file a report with our fraud department. They'll investigate and determine the next steps." As we left the bank, Dean was quiet for a long time. Finally, he turned to me as we reached his car. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I thought I was taking care of you all this time. I had no idea you were struggling. It's not your fault, sweetheart. It is my fault," he said, his voice breaking. "I trusted her. I gave her access to my accounts because I thought we were building a life together. I never imagined she would steal from my own mother." We drove back to the hospital in silence, both lost in our own thoughts. But as Dean pulled into the parking garage, he suddenly gripped the steering wheel tighter. "What are we going to do?" he asked. "How do I confront her about this?" I looked at my son, seeing the little boy he used to be underneath the successful businessman he had become. "We don't have to do anything right now," I said. "But Dean, you need to know that this might not be the only secret she's been keeping." He looked at me with haunted eyes. "What do you mean?" "If she could lie about this for 3 years, if she could watch you worry about me while she was stealing money meant for my medication and rent, what else might she be hiding?" As we walked back into the hospital, I could see Dean's mind working, probably remembering small things that had seemed insignificant at the time, the pieces of a puzzle that was about to reveal a picture neither of us was prepared to see. Alawan was awake when we returned to her room, looking pale but alert. She smiled when she saw Dean, but her eyes were wary when they landed on me. "How are you feeling, darling?" Dean asked, but his voice was different now, cautious. "Much better," she said. "I think I just got overwhelmed at the restaurant. All that talk about money." She trailed off, and I could have sworn I saw a flicker of something calculating in her green eyes. "Yes," Dean said slowly, "about that money conversation. Mom and I had a chance to talk while you were resting." Alawan's face went very still. "Oh?" And in that moment, sitting in that sterile hospital room, I knew we were about to uncover something that would shatter my son's world completely. The silence in Alawan's hospital room was deafening. I watched my daughter-in-law's face carefully, noting how her expression had shifted from concern to something much more guarded. Dean stood at the foot of her bed, his hands clenched at his sides. "We went to the bank," Dean said finally, his voice carefully controlled. "We looked at the account where I've been sending Mom's money. Elowen's fingers tightened around the hospital blanket. Oh? And what did you find? The account belongs to E. Hartwell. Dean paused, letting the words hang in the air. Would you like to explain that to me? I expected anger, tears, maybe even a dramatic confession. What I didn't expect was the cold smile that slowly spread across Elowen's face. Oh, Dean, she said softly, almost pityingly. You really don't understand, do you? Dean blinked. Understand what? Elowen sat up straighter in the hospital bed, and suddenly she didn't look like a woman who had just collapsed from stress. She looked calculating, in control. Your mother has been lying to you for years. What are you talking about? I said, finding my voice. Elowen turned those green eyes on me, and they were as cold as winter. The confused old woman act is very convincing, Daphne, but we both know the truth. My heart started pounding. I have no idea what you mean. The money arrives in your account every month, just like Dean intends, but you've been gambling it away. She turned back to Dean, her voice taking on a concerned, caring tone. Honey, I've been trying to protect you from this for 3 years. Dean looked between us, confusion written across his face. That's impossible. We just saw the bank records. The money goes to your account, not Mom's. Because I've been trying to help her, Elowen exclaimed, and suddenly there were tears in her eyes. Dean, your mother has a gambling addiction. She begged me not to tell you because she was so ashamed. I've been intercepting the money and trying to get her into treatment programs, but she keeps refusing help. I felt the world tilt around me. The accusation was so outrageous, so completely false, that for a moment I couldn't even speak. That's a lie, I managed to whisper. Dean, I haven't gambled a day in my life. You know that. But I could see the doubt creeping into my son's eyes. Elowen was a skilled manipulator, and she was weaving her web with practiced ease. I have proof, Elowen continued, reaching for her purse on the bedside table. I kept copies of everything to show you when I thought you were ready to handle it. She pulled out a manila folder. Look. Dean took the folder with trembling hands and opened it. Inside were bank statements, but not the ones we had just seen at the bank. These showed deposits of $5,000 each month into an account with my name on it, followed by large withdrawals. ATM withdrawals, Elowen explained sadly. Always at the same casino, the Riverbend Gaming Center. And look at the timing, always within days of receiving your money. I stared at the papers, my mouth hanging open. The bank statements looked completely legitimate, complete with my name and what appeared to be my account number, but I had never seen them before in my life. These are fake, I said desperately. Dean, these are completely fabricated. Are they? Elowen asked gently. Dean, call the casino. Ask them if Daphne Hartwell is a regular customer. Dean looked at me with something that might have been pity. Mom, is this true? No, I shouted louder than I intended. Dean, I swear to you, I have never been to a casino. I don't even know where the Riverbend Gaming Center is. It's about 20 minutes from your apartment, Elowen said softly. You told me you take the bus there. The lies were coming so smoothly, so convincingly, that I felt like I was drowning. Dean, please. You have to believe me. But Dean was studying the fake bank statements, and I could see him trying to make sense of it all. These look real, Mom. Because I had them professionally prepared, Elowen said, and there was something almost triumphant in her voice now. I've been documenting everything for 3 years, waiting for the right time to tell you. Your mother is sick, Dean. She needs help. I am not sick. I stood up so fast that my chair nearly toppled. Dean, she's lying to you. She's been stealing from me, from us, for 3 years. Elowen pressed a hand to her forehead dramatically. The stress of being confronted is making her agitated. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Dean was looking at me now like I was a stranger, and I felt my heart breaking. Mom, please sit down. Let's talk about this calmly. There's nothing to talk about, I said, my voice cracking. Your wife is a thief and a liar, and she's trying to make you think I'm crazy so you won't believe the truth. Daphne, Elowen said softly. I understand that you're embarrassed about your gambling problem, but denying it isn't helping anyone. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. On one of the fake bank statements, there was a small error. The routing number was wrong. It showed the routing number for First National Bank, but I had been banking with Community Savings for 20 years. It was a tiny mistake, but it was proof that the documents were forged. "Dean," I said urgently, "look at the routing number on that statement." He glanced down. "What about it?" "What bank do I use?" "Community Savings," he said slowly. "You've been with them since I was a kid. And what's the routing number for Community Savings?" Dean frowned, pulling out his phone to look it up. After a moment, his face went pale. "It's different. The routing number on these statements is wrong." Elowen's confident expression faltered for just a moment, but she recovered quickly. Bank routing numbers change sometimes. Maybe they updated theirs. But Dean was already calling Community Savings, asking them to confirm their routing number. When he hung up, his face was grim. "The routing number hasn't changed in 15 years. "So these statements are fake," I said, relief flooding through me. But Elowen wasn't finished. "Dean, listen to me very carefully," she said, her voice taking on a desperate edge. "Your mother is a master manipulator. She's been playing the victim for years, making you feel guilty so you'll support her financially. This is exactly what addicts do. They lie, they manipulate, they make everyone around them doubt reality." I watched in horror as Dean wavered again. Elowen's words were like poison, and I could see them taking root in his mind. "Think about it," she continued. "Has your mother ever actually shown you bills that she couldn't pay? Has she ever provided proof of her financial struggles? Or has she just told you stories designed to make you feel sorry for her?" "That's not. I mean..." Dean looked at me helplessly. "Mom, you've never actually shown me your bank statements or your medical bills." "Because I was embarrassed," I cried. "I didn't want you to know how bad things were. Or because they would show the truth about where the money really goes," Elowen said quietly. I felt like I was in a nightmare where no matter what I said, no matter what proof I offered, the lies kept multiplying faster than I could counter them. Elowen had been planning this for 3 years, building her story, creating false documents, preparing for the day when she might be caught. "Dean," I said desperately, "call my landlord. Ask him how many times I've been late with rent. Call my pharmacy and ask them how often I've had to delay picking up my prescriptions because I couldn't afford them. Call anyone who knows me and ask them if they've ever seen me gambling." But Elowen shook her head sadly. "Gambling addicts are very good at hiding their addiction. They seem like normal people to everyone else." Dean stood there in the middle of the hospital room, looking torn between the 2 women in his life. And I realized with growing horror that Elowen might actually win. Her lies were more sophisticated than the truth. Her manipulation more compelling than my desperate denials. "There's one thing you're forgetting," I said finally, grasping for anything that might save me. "If I had access to $5,000 every month, why would I be wearing clothes with holes in them? Why would I be living in a studio apartment? Even if I was gambling, I would have bought myself a decent coat." Elowen's eyes flashed with something dangerous. Because gambling addicts lose everything. They gamble away money faster than they receive it, and they become very good at looking pitiful to maintain sympathy from their families. "No," Dean said suddenly, and both Elowen and I turned to look at him. "No, that doesn't make sense." Elowen's perfect composure slipped slightly. "What do you mean? If Mom was getting $5,000 a month and gambling it away, she'd still have new clothes sometimes. Gambling addicts don't lose every single penny every single time. There would be good days mixed in with the bad days." Dean was thinking out loud now, working through the logic. "And Mom's apartment. It's not just old, Elowen. It's the same apartment she's lived in for 15 years. If she had been receiving money regularly, even if she was gambling most of it away, something would have improved." I felt a spark of hope. "Dean, I can prove I've never been to that casino. I don't even have a car. I can't take the bus 20 minutes away. My arthritis makes it too painful to sit that long." "She takes taxis," Elowen said quickly, but her voice was strained now. "With what money?" Dean asked, his voice getting stronger. "Elowen, You're saying she gambles away $5,000 a month, but she somehow also has money for taxi rides to the casino? The lies were starting to unravel, and I could see panic creeping into Eloan's eyes. But I also knew that a cornered animal was the most dangerous kind. Fine, she said suddenly, her voice hard as steel. You want the truth? The real truth? Dean and I both stared at her. Your mother is not a gambling addict, Eloan continued. She's something much worse. She's a manipulative, ungrateful old woman who has been bleeding you dry emotionally for years. I intercepted that money to protect you from her endless demands for more. And the mask had finally slipped, and the real Eloan was standing before us, cold, calculating, and utterly without remorse. I've been trying to shield you from her for 3 years, she said, her voice dripping with venom. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is to listen to her sob stories? How tired I am of watching her guilt you into sacrificing our future for her comfort. Dean took a step back from the hospital bed, his face white with shock. Eloan, what are you saying? I'm saying that I took the money because you're too soft-hearted to see what she really is, Eloan snapped. I used it to build our life together, to secure our future. That money bought the down payment for our house, funded our vacations, paid for my car, and I don't regret it for 1 second. The confession hung in the air between us like a toxic cloud. Dean was staring at his wife like he had never seen her before. You stole from my mother, he said slowly, as if testing the words. I protected our marriage from a leech, Eloan shot back. And if you think I'm going to apologize for that, you're wrong. But as she spoke, I noticed something else in her eyes, something that made my blood run cold. She wasn't just admitting to theft. She was enjoying it. She was enjoying the look of devastation on Dean's face, the shock and betrayal. This wasn't just about money. This was about power, about control, about destroying the relationship between a mother and son. And I realized that the theft was probably just the beginning. If Eloan was capable of this level of deception and cruelty, what else had she done? What other secrets was she hiding? The revelation of Eloan's true nature should have been the end of it. Dean should have kicked her out of his life immediately, called the police, demanded justice. But as I watched my son's face in that sterile hospital room, I saw something that terrified me more than all of Eloan's lies combined. Confusion, doubt. And underneath it all, a desperate desire to believe that the woman he loved wasn't the monster she had just revealed herself to be. Eloan, Dean said slowly, his voice hollow, tell me you didn't just admit to stealing from my mother. Eloan's green eyes filled with tears that looked surprisingly genuine. Oh, honey, she said softly, I can see how this sounds, but you have to understand the context. Context? I couldn't help myself. What context could possibly justify stealing $180,000 from an elderly woman? But Eloan wasn't looking at me anymore. Her entire focus was on Dean, and I watched with growing dread as she shifted tactics once again. Dean, sit down, she said gently. Please, let me explain everything. Against my better judgment, Dean sank into the chair beside her bed. Eloan reached for his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, he let her take it. 3 years ago, when we first got married, I was so excited to be part of your family, she began, her voice taking on that honey-sweet tone I had learned to fear. I wanted to love your mother, to take care of her the way a good daughter-in-law should. I opened my mouth to protest, but Dean held up a hand to silence me. But then I started noticing things, Eloan continued. The way she would call you at all hours, crying about her bills. The way she would guilt you into sending her money by talking about choosing between medication and food. And Dean, sweetheart, I started to worry that she was taking advantage of your generous heart. That's not true, I said desperately. I never called him asking for money. I never even knew he was sending it. Of course you're going to deny it now, Eloan said sadly, not even looking at me. But Dean, think back. How many times has your mother called you in tears? How many times has she told you stories about struggling to pay rent or afford groceries? Dean's face was troubled. She has called upset sometimes. But that's normal for someone in her situation. Is it? Eloan squeezed his hand. Dean, I did some research after our wedding. Do you know how much your mother receives in Social Security each month? I felt my stomach drop. I had always been private about my finances, even with Dean. It was a matter of pride. $1,200, Alawan continued. Plus, she has a small pension from the hospital where she worked as a nurse for 30 years. That brings her total monthly income to about $1,800. Dean looked at me with surprise. Mom, why didn't you ever tell me about your pension? It's not much, I said quietly. $200 a month after taxes. But it's something, Elowen said gently. And Dean, $1,800 is enough to live on if you budget carefully. Plenty of seniors manage on less. So when I saw how often your mother was calling you for help, I started to wonder if she was being completely honest about her needs. I could see where this was going, and my heart started racing. Dean, don't listen to her. She's manipulating you again. But Elowen's voice was so reasonable, so caring, that even I almost found myself believing her. So, I decided to help, she said. I suggested that instead of sending money directly to your mother, where she might feel pressured to spend it on non-essentials or feel guilty about accepting it, we should manage it for her. Manage it? Dean repeated slowly. I opened a savings account in my name, but the money was always meant for her. I was planning to surprise her with it on her 70th birthday. A lump sum that would secure her future and show her how much you love her. The lie was so smooth, so believable, that for a moment even I wondered if it could be true. But then I remembered the confession she had made just minutes earlier. The venom in her voice when she admitted to protecting their future from my endless demands. That's not what you said 5 minutes ago, I pointed out. You said you used the money for your house down payment and vacations. Elowen's face crumpled with what looked like genuine remorse. I know how that sounded, and I'm so ashamed. The truth is, yes, some of the money got mixed in with our regular expenses. When we were house hunting, I borrowed against your mother's fund for the down payment, but I always planned to pay it back with interest. She turned back to Dean, tears streaming down her face. I've made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. I should have been more careful about keeping the money separate. I should have told you what I was doing from the beginning. But Dean, I swear to you, everything I did was because I love you, and I want to protect your relationship with your mother. I watched in horror as Dean's expression softened. The woman was a master manipulator, capable of reshaping reality with nothing but tears and carefully chosen words. Protecting our relationship? Dean asked. How was stealing protecting anything? Because I was afraid that if your mother kept coming to you for money, you would eventually resent her for it, Elowen said softly. I've seen it happen in other families. Adult children who feel obligated to support their parents but begin to feel trapped by the responsibility. I didn't want that to happen to you. So you decided to steal the money instead, I said, my voice shaking with rage. I didn't steal it, Elowen insisted, finally looking at me. I managed it. And Daphne, you have to admit, you never really needed it. You've been surviving just fine on your Social Security and pension for the past 3 years. The audacity of it took my breath away. Surviving? You call choosing between medication and rent surviving? But you always managed to pay your rent, Elowen pointed out. And you always got your medication eventually. Maybe not on the exact day you preferred, but you got it. Because I skipped meals, I shouted. Because I wore the same clothes for 15 years. Because I rationed my arthritis pills and lived in pain. And I'm truly sorry about that, Elowen said, and she actually sounded sincere. If I had known you were suffering, I would have given you access to the money immediately. But Daphne, you never called Dean to tell him you needed help. You never reached out to me. How was I supposed to know? Dean was looking between us, and I could see him struggling to make sense of it all. Mom, is that true? Did you ever call to ask about the money you thought you should be receiving? I stared at him. Dean, I didn't know you were sending money at all. How could I call to ask about something I didn't know existed? But if you were struggling as much as you say you were, wouldn't you have called me for help? The question hit me like a physical blow. I didn't want to be a burden. You see? Elowen said gently. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Daphne, your pride was keeping you from asking for help, which meant Dean didn't know how bad things really were. I was trying to find a way to help you without making you feel like a charity case. By stealing the money he was trying to send me, by managing it responsibly until the right time to present it to you. I felt like I was losing my mind. Every word out of Elowen's mouth was a lie, but she was wrapping those lies in just enough truth to make them sound plausible. Yes, I was proud. Yes, I had never called Dean asking for money. Yes, I had managed to survive on my small income, but I had suffered. I had lived in pain, worn clothes with holes, eaten rice and beans for weeks at a time to afford my medication. And all the while, there was money sitting in Elowen's account that could have changed everything. Dean, I said desperately. Ask her to show you the savings account she supposedly opened for me. Ask her for bank statements showing this money being kept separate from her personal expenses. Elowen's face went pale for just a moment, but she recovered quickly. The account is. It's complicated. Because of the house down payment and some other financial decisions we made, the money is tied up in investments right now. Investments? Dean asked. Real estate, mostly. The money is safe and growing, but it's not liquid right now. That's another reason I haven't been able to give it to your mother yet. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Dean, she's lying. There is no savings account. There are no investments. She spent that money on herself, and now she's making up stories to cover it. But Dean was looking at Elowen with something that might have been relief, as if her complicated explanations were preferable to the simple truth that his wife was a thief. How much is in the investments now? He asked. Elowen hesitated for just a moment too long. Well, the real estate market has been volatile, so it's hard to say exactly, but I estimate around $250,000. $250,000, I repeated incredulously. You're claiming that the $180,000 you stole has grown to $250,000 in 3 years. It's not impossible, Dean said, but his voice was uncertain. Dean, I said, fighting to keep my voice calm. Ask her to show you these investments. Ask her for documentation. Ask her to liquidate them right now and give me the money that was always meant for me. It's not that simple, Elowen said quickly. There are penalties for early withdrawal, tax implications. We need to consult with a financial advisor to do this properly. Or, I said, my voice deadly quiet, you could admit that there are no investments, no savings account, no plan to give me anything. You could admit that you've been lying to my son for 3 years and that every word coming out of your mouth right now is another lie designed to keep you out of prison. The hospital room fell silent except for the steady beeping of monitors from other rooms. Dean sat between us, looking like a man watching his world collapse. I want to see the investment documents, he said finally. Elowen's face went white. Dean, I don't have them with me. They're at home, in our safe. Then we'll go get them. The doctor said I should stay overnight for observation. The doctor said you could leave in a few hours if you were feeling better. Are you feeling better, Elowen? I held my breath, watching as my daughter-in-law realized that her web of lies was finally starting to trap her instead of protecting her. Dean, she said softly, I can see that you don't trust me right now, and I understand why, but I'm begging you to give me a chance to prove that everything I've told you is true. How? And come home with me tonight. Let me show you everything. The investment documents, the savings account statements, all of it. And if you're not satisfied with what I show you, then we'll figure out how to make this right. Dean looked at me, his eyes full of pain. Mom, would that be okay with you? If we sort this out tonight? Ooh, what choice did I have? If I demanded that we call the police right now, Dean would always wonder if I had prevented him from learning the truth about his wife's supposed investments. I had to let Elowen dig her own grave. Fine, I said. But Dean, I want to be there when she shows you these documents. Absolutely not, Elowen said quickly. This is between my husband and me. This is about money that was meant for me, I replied firmly. I have every right to see proof of these investments. Dean looked torn. Maybe it would be better if I handled this alone, Mom. Just for tonight. And that's when I realized that even though Elowen's lies were unraveling, she was still winning. She was still managing to isolate Dean, to make him choose between us. and I was terrified that when morning came, she would have found a way to make him believe that black was white and up was down. "Dean," I said urgently, "please don't let her convince you that I'm the problem here. Please remember what we discovered today. That money was stolen from me for 3 years. Don't let her twist that into something else." Dean nodded, but his expression was troubled. "I'll call you tomorrow morning, Mom, after I've seen everything." As I watched them prepare to leave together, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the hospital's air conditioning. Elowen had admitted to theft, but somehow she was still in control. She was still the one calling the shots. And I had a terrible feeling that by tomorrow morning, Dean would be convinced that his mother was a liar and his wife was a misunderstood saint. The game was far from over. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my small apartment, staring at the phone, waiting for Dean to call. Every hour that passed felt like a lifetime. I imagined Elowen weaving new lies, creating fake documents, finding ways to make her theft look like charity. By dawn, I was convinced that I had lost my son forever. The call came at 7:30 in the morning. Dean's voice was strange, hollow, like he hadn't slept either. "Mom," he said without preamble, "can you come over to the house? There's something you need to see." "Did she show you the investment documents?" A long pause. "Just come over, Mom. Please." The drive to Dean's house felt like driving to my own execution. I had been there only a handful of times since he married Elowen. She always made it clear that I wasn't particularly welcome. It was a beautiful home in an upscale neighborhood, the kind of place I had always dreamed Dean would live someday. Now, I knew it had been purchased with money meant for my medication and rent. Dean answered the door before I could knock. He looked terrible, pale, exhausted, like he had aged 10 years overnight. "Come in," he said quietly. I followed him into the living room, a spacious area decorated in Elowen's preferred style of white furniture and expensive art. Elowen was nowhere to be seen. "Where is she?" I asked. "Upstairs? She's not feeling well." Dean gestured for me to sit on the pristine white sofa. "Mom, I need to tell you what happened last night." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Did she show you the investments?" Dean laughed, but it was a bitter sound with no humor in it. "Oh, she showed me something all right, but it wasn't investments." He picked up a manila folder from the coffee table and handed it to me. "Open it." Inside were bank statements, real ones this time, with Elowen's name and account numbers clearly visible. I scanned the pages, my eyes widening as I took in the deposits and withdrawals. $5,000 deposited on the first of every month, like clockwork. But the withdrawals told a different story. Designer clothing stores, expensive restaurants, spa treatments, jewelry stores, luxury vacation bookings. Month after month, year after year, my money had been funding Elowen's lifestyle, while I rationed my arthritis medication and wore clothes with holes in them. "There are no investments," Dean said quietly. "There never were. She spent it all." I looked up at him, seeing the pain in his eyes. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart." "She tried to show me fake investment documents at first," Dean continued. "Papers she had printed from the internet, made to look official. But when I started asking detailed questions about the investment firm, about account numbers and contact information, the lies started falling apart." "What did you do?" Dean rubbed his face with both hands. "I confronted her. I told her I was calling the police if she didn't tell me the truth. That's when she broke down and admitted everything." "Everything?" "More than you know, Mom. So much more than you know." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" Dean stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the perfectly manicured lawn that had been paid for with my stolen money. "The money wasn't the only thing she was hiding. Mom, she's been intercepting your calls." "What? You know how you said you never called me asking for help? Well, it turns out you did. Multiple times over the past 3 years. Elowen has been answering my phone when you called, pretending to be my assistant or secretary, and telling you I was too busy to talk." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "That's impossible. You don't have an assistant." "I know, but she would tell you I was in important meetings, or traveling for business, or dealing with family emergencies. She would take messages and promise that I would call you back, but then she would delete them." The memories came flooding back. All the times I had called Dean's number, desperate for help or just wanting to hear his voice, only to be told by a professional-sounding woman that he was unavailable. I had thought he was just busy, successful, living his life. "She kept a log," Dean said, his voice breaking. "A detailed log of every call you made, what you said, what excuse she gave you. Mom, you called me 17 times in the past year alone. 17 times, and I never knew." I started crying then, deep sobs that shook my entire body. "What did I say? In the messages?" Dean pulled a piece of paper from the folder. His hands were shaking as he read from it. December 3rd, called asking if Dean could help with heating bill. Told her Dean was out of town for the holidays. December 15th, called crying, said she had to choose between Christmas presents and medication. Told her Dean was dealing with a family crisis and couldn't be reached. He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. "Mom, you called on Christmas Eve last year. You were crying because you were spending Christmas alone and you just wanted to hear my voice. Alawan told you I had taken her skiing and wouldn't be back until after New Year's." "I remember that call," I whispered. "I thought you were too busy to think about your old mother." "I was here," Dean said desperately. "I was right here, wondering why you hadn't called to wish me Merry Christmas. Alawan told me you were probably spending the holidays with friends, that you were doing fine." The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Alawan hadn't just stolen money. She had stolen 3 years of relationship between a mother and son. She had systematically isolated us from each other, making each of us believe that the other didn't care. "There's more," Dean said. "She's been doing the same thing with your letters." "Letters?" "You've been sending me birthday cards, Christmas cards, thank you notes. She intercepted them all. I found them in a box in her closet, dozens of them, unopened." He pulled out another folder. "She kept them as trophies, I think." With trembling hands, I opened the folder and saw cards I had sent over the past 3 years. My own handwriting staring back at me, messages of love and gratitude that had never reached my son. Birthday wishes, holiday greetings. A thank you card I had sent after I thought he had helped me with a dental bill, not knowing that Elowen had simply paid it with money she was already stealing from me. "She even sent me Christmas cards," Dean said, his voice hollow. "Cards supposedly from you, but written in her handwriting. Cold, formal cards that made you sound distant and ungrateful. I thought you were pulling away from me." I looked up at him through my tears. "I would never pull away from you. You're all I have. I know that now. But Mom, she's been playing us against each other for 3 years. Every time you tried to reach out, she blocked it. Every time I thought about calling you, she had some excuse for why I shouldn't. You were busy. You were doing fine. You had made it clear you preferred your independence." The scope of Alawan's manipulation was staggering. She hadn't just stolen money. She had stolen our relationship, our trust, our love for each other. She had turned us into strangers living in the same city, each believing the other didn't care. "How did you find all this out?" I asked. Dean's jaw tightened. "When I realized the investment documents were fake, I told her I was done with the lies. I said either she told me everything right then, or I was calling the police and filing for divorce in the morning. She panicked and started confessing to things I hadn't even suspected. Where is she now?" "Upstairs, packing. I told her she had until noon to get out of my house." "Dean, are you sure? I mean, she's your wife." He turned from the window to look at me, and his eyes were harder than I had ever seen them. "Mom, she didn't just steal from you. She stole 3 years of my relationship with my mother. She made me believe you didn't care about me. Made you believe I didn't care about you. That's not just theft. That's emotional torture." As if summoned by our conversation, Elowen appeared in the doorway. She was dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, but her eyes were red from crying. She looked young and vulnerable, nothing like the calculating predator I now knew her to be. "Dean," she said softly, "can we please talk about this privately?" "No," Dean replied flatly. "Anything you want to say can be said in front of my mother." Alawan's gaze shifted to me, and for a moment I saw something that looked like genuine remorse. "Daphne, I know you hate me right now, and I understand why. But I want you to know that I never meant for it to go this far. You never meant for what to go this far? I asked. The theft? The lies? Destroying my relationship with my son? I was protecting him, Elowen said, her voice taking on that pleading tone again. Dean works so hard, he's under so much pressure. I didn't want him worrying about you constantly. So you decided to steal from me instead? I was going to give it back, Elowen insisted. When Dean got his next promotion, when our finances were more stable, I was going to surprise you both with everything. Dean laughed bitterly. Elowen, you've had 3 years to give it back. Instead, you bought designer clothes and took luxury vacations. Those vacations were for us, Elowen said desperately. For our marriage. Dean, you needed those breaks from work stress. And the clothes. I needed to look professional for my job. Your job at the gallery that pays $30,000 a year? Dean's voice was incredulous. Elowen, you spent more on clothes last month than most people make in 6 months. I watched this exchange with a mixture of fascination and disgust. Even now, caught red-handed with undeniable evidence of her crimes, Elowen was still trying to manipulate the situation, still trying to make herself the victim. What I don't understand, I said suddenly, is why. Why go to all this trouble? If you needed money, Dean would have given it to you. Why steal from his mother specifically? Elowen's face went very still. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do, I pressed. This wasn't just about money. You could have convinced Dean to support your lifestyle in 100 different ways. But you specifically chose to steal money that was meant for me. You chose to intercept my calls, to block my letters. You wanted to hurt me personally. That's not true. Then why? Dean asked, his voice deadly quiet. Mom's right. I would have bought you anything you wanted. Why steal from her? Elowen was trapped, and we all knew it. For a long moment, the room was silent, except for the sound of her breathing. Then, slowly, her mask slipped away completely. Because she was a threat, Elowen said, her voice cold as winter. Because every time Dean talked about his mother, his voice would get soft and caring. Because he kept your picture on his desk at work, and he would light up whenever you called. Because no matter how much I gave him, no matter how perfect I tried to be, I always knew that you came first in his heart. The honesty was brutal and unexpected. Dean stared at his wife like she was a stranger. I thought if I could make you disappear from his life gradually, naturally, he would finally be completely mine, Elowen continued. I thought if you stopped calling, stopped writing, stopped being part of his world, he would forget about you and focus entirely on me. You wanted to erase my mother from my life, Dean said slowly, because you were jealous of her. I wanted to be enough for you, Elowen whispered. I wanted to be the only woman you needed. The confession hung in the air like poison gas. This hadn't been about money at all. It had been about possession, about a sick need to completely control Dean's emotional life. You destroyed 3 years of my relationship with my son because you were jealous, I said, my voice shaking with rage. I'm sorry, Elowen said, but her apology sounded hollow. I know it was wrong. You're not sorry, Dean said suddenly. You're sorry you got caught. He was right. Even now, even with all the evidence spread out before us, Elowen wasn't truly repentant. She was calculating, trying to find a way to minimize the damage, to salvage whatever she could from the wreckage of her lies. But she had made one crucial mistake. In her rush to confess everything last night, to convince Dean not to call the police, she had forgotten something important. Dean pulled out his phone and set it on the coffee table. By the way, Elowen, I've been recording this conversation. Her face went white. What? Everything you just said about wanting to erase my mother from my life, about being jealous, about the systematic theft and manipulation, it's all recorded. Elowen stared at the phone like it was a snake about to strike. Dean, you can't. That's not legal. Actually, it is, Dean replied calmly. California is a 2-party consent state for phone calls, but not for in-person conversations in your own home. This recording is completely admissible in court. I looked at my son with new respect. Even in his pain, even with his world collapsing around him, He had thought clearly enough to protect us both. Why? Elowen whispered. Because, Dean said, standing up and walking toward the door, I wanted to make sure that when the police ask me what happened, I have proof of everything you admitted to. The police? Elowen's voice cracked. They'll be here in about 20 minutes, Dean said. I called them before you came downstairs. And just like that, the game was over. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my new apartment, a spacious one-bedroom place just 10 minutes from Dean's house. Sunlight streamed through the large windows as I prepared dinner. Real dinner, with fresh vegetables and good cuts of meat that I could finally afford. The arthritis medication I took every morning was the name-brand version my doctor had always recommended, but I had never been able to afford. My new winter coat hung in the closet, warm and stylish and free of holes. But the most precious thing in my new life wasn't anything I could buy. It was the sound of my grandson's laughter echoing through the apartment as Dean chased him around the living room. Tommy was 18 months old now, walking and getting into everything with the fearless curiosity of a toddler. Dean had gained full custody after Elowen's arrest, and I was finally getting to be the grandmother I had always dreamed of being. Grandma Daffy! Tommy squealed as he ran toward me, his little arms outstretched. The nickname had started as Grandma Daphne, but had been shortened by his developing vocabulary. I scooped him up, breathing in the sweet scent of baby shampoo and pure innocence. Hello, my little love, I said, covering his face with kisses as he giggled. Are you helping Daddy make a mess of my living room? We're building a fort, Dean called from the other room, where couch cushions and blankets were scattered everywhere. Engineering is very serious business. I carried Tommy back to the living room, marveling at how much Dean had changed since that terrible day in the hospital. The guilt and betrayal had nearly broken him at first, but as the months passed and we rebuilt our relationship, he had become the man I always knew he could be, more open, more affectionate, more present in every moment. How was your day? I asked as I settled onto the couch with Tommy in my lap. Good, Dean replied, but there was something in his voice that made me look at him more carefully. Actually, there's something I need to tell you. My heart skipped a beat. Even after all these months, unexpected conversations still made me nervous. What is it? Dean sat down beside us, his expression serious but not worried. I got a call from the prosecutor's office today. Elowen's lawyer wants to plea bargain. I had been dreading this call. Elowen's trial was scheduled to begin in 2 months, and while Dean's recording had made the case against her ironclad, I knew that trials could be unpredictable things. What kind of plea bargain? I asked. Full restitution, every penny of the $180,000 plus interest, 3 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation. And she has to surrender any claim to marital assets, including this house. I considered this while Tommy played with my necklace, completely oblivious to the adult conversation swirling around him. What do you think we should do? Dean was quiet for a moment. Honestly, Mom, I think we should take it. A trial would be public, messy. Tommy's too young to understand now, but someday he might see news articles about his mother being a criminal. If we accept the plea, it stays relatively private. I understood his reasoning, but there was something else to consider. Dean, what does your heart tell you? Not your head, your heart. He looked at me with those dark eyes that were so much like mine. My heart tells me that I want this to be over. I want to focus on building a life with you and Tommy, not on reliving the past in a courtroom. Then that's what we'll do. Dean reached over and squeezed my hand. Are you sure? You're the one she hurt most. If you want your day in court? I thought about it for a moment. There had been a time, in those first few weeks after the truth came out, when I had fantasized about watching Elowen face a jury, about seeing her lies exposed for all the world to see. But now, with Tommy babbling happily in my lap and Dean's hand warm in mine, revenge seemed less important than peace. I'm sure, I said. Let's put this behind us. That evening, after Dean and Tommy had gone home, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. My phone rang, Dean's number. Did you forget something? I asked with a smile. No, I just wanted to call and say goodnight, Dean replied. Tommy's asking for you. He wants to know if Grandma Daffy can read him a story over the phone. My heart swelled. Put him on. A moment later, Tommy's sweet voice came through the speaker. Gamma Daffy! Story! What story would you like tonight, sweetheart? 3 pigs! I laughed and began the familiar tale, making my voice dramatic for the wolf and gentle for the pigs. Through the phone, I could hear Dean moving around, probably cleaning up the dinner dishes and getting ready for Tommy's bedtime routine. These evening calls had become a treasured ritual for all of us. When the story was finished and Tommy had been tucked into bed, Dean came back on the line. Mom, he said softly, I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again. I'm so sorry for what she put you through. I'm sorry I didn't see what was happening. Dean, we've talked about this. I know, but sometimes I lie awake at night thinking about you rationing your medication while she was buying designer shoes with your money. I think about you spending Christmas alone because she told you I was busy. I think about all the times you called just wanting to hear my voice, and she turned you away. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar ache in my chest. Sweetheart, you can't carry that guilt forever. She fooled both of us. She was very good at what she did, but I should have known. I should have checked on you more, should have insisted on visiting even when she made excuses. The important thing is that we found each other again, I said firmly. The important thing is Tommy, and this new life we're building together. There was a long pause. Do you really forgive me? There's nothing to forgive. But Dean, if it helps you to hear me say it, yes, I forgive you completely. Now please forgive yourself. After we hung up, I stayed on the balcony for a long time, thinking about forgiveness and second chances, and the strange ways that life could break you apart and then put you back together stronger than before. 2 weeks later, I was babysitting Tommy while Dean worked late. We had spent the afternoon at the park, where Tommy had insisted on going down every slide at least 3 times, and had charmed every grandmother on the playground. Now he was napping in what had become his room in my apartment. Dean had moved a crib and changing table in so that Tommy could stay overnight whenever needed. I was reading quietly in the living room when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a woman I didn't recognize. Middle-aged, well-dressed, with nervous eyes. Can I help you? I asked through the door. Are you Daphne Hartwell? Dean's mother? Something in her voice made me open the door, but I kept the chain latched. Yes, who are you? My name is Patricia Morgan. I was Elowen's supervisor at the art gallery where she worked. My blood turned cold. What do you want? I need to talk to you, Patricia said urgently. About Elowen, about things she did that you might not know about. I hesitated. The plea bargain had been finalized just 3 days ago. Elowen would begin serving her sentence next month. What could this woman possibly tell me that would matter now? Please, Patricia continued. There are other victims, people she hurt before she met your son. You have a right to know who you're dealing with. Against my better judgment, I unlatched the chain and let her in. Patricia sat on the edge of my couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I should have come forward earlier, she began. But I was afraid, and I thought maybe she had changed. I thought maybe marriage had settled her down. What are you talking about? Patricia took a deep breath. Elowen worked at our gallery for 2 years before she met Dean. In that time, she embezzled nearly $50,000 from our accounts. She was very clever about it. Small amounts over time, false invoices for art supplies that were never delivered, inflated prices for pieces we sold. I stared at her. Did you report it? We discovered it right around the time she started dating your son. She begged us not to press charges, said she would pay everything back. She seemed genuinely remorseful, and she was already planning to leave the job anyway to focus on her relationship with Dean. My business partner and I made a mistake. We agreed to let her pay restitution quietly, rather than involving the police. Did she pay you back? Patricia's laugh was bitter. She made a few token payments at first, maybe $5,000 total. Then the payments stopped completely. When we tried to contact her, she claimed the debt was legally forgiven because we hadn't pursued criminal charges within the statute of limitations. I felt sick. You're saying she was already a professional thief when she met Dean? I'm saying she was a professional predator, Patricia replied. After she married your son, I did some research. Alawan Morrison has a pattern going back at least 10 years. She gets jobs at small businesses or art galleries, places where she can access financial information and build trust with the owners. She embezzles money gradually, over time, always careful not to take enough to trigger immediate attention, and then she finds a wealthy man to marry and disappears into a new life. The room was spinning around me. Are you saying she married Dean just for his money? Or I think she married him because he was young, successful, and most importantly, emotionally vulnerable because of his complicated relationship with his mother. The words hit me like a physical blow. What do you mean? She told us quite a bit about Dean while she was working for us. How guilty he felt about not being closer to his mother. How he worried that you didn't approve of his lifestyle. How he sent you money but never heard back from you to know if it was helping. I could barely breathe. She knew about our relationship problems before she ever married him? She knew about them because she researched him, Patricia said grimly. Just like she researched my business before she applied for the job there. Elowen doesn't do anything by accident. She studies her targets, learns their weaknesses, and then exploits them. The full scope of Elowen's manipulation was becoming clear, and it was so much worse than I had imagined. She hadn't just stolen money and intercepted phone calls. She had specifically targeted Dean because she knew about his complicated feelings regarding me. She had married him not in spite of our relationship problems, but because of them. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Patricia reached into her purse and pulled out a folder. Because there are at least 3 other women I've been able to track down. Women who worked for businesses where Elowen stole money before moving on to bigger targets. We've been talking about coming forward together, adding our cases to the charges against her. I opened the folder and found police reports, financial records, and statements from other victims. The pattern was clear and undeniable. Elowen wasn't just a thief. She was a career criminal who had been perfecting her methods for years. The prosecutor says that if we can establish a pattern of similar crimes, it could add significant time to her sentence, Patricia continued. Instead of 3 years, she could be looking at 10 to 15. I thought about this while Tommy continued to sleep peacefully in the next room. Part of me wanted to see Elowen pay for every life she had destroyed, every person she had manipulated and robbed. But another part of me just wanted her gone from our lives forever. I need to talk to Dean about this, I said finally. Of course. But Mrs. Hartwell, I want you to know something else. Based on the financial records we've compiled, we believe Elowen has hidden assets. Money she stole from various sources over the years and never spent. Money she's probably planning to access when she gets out of prison. Hidden where? Offshore accounts, probably. Maybe cryptocurrency or precious metals. She's too smart to keep stolen money in regular bank accounts where it could be traced. When Patricia left, I sat in my quiet living room and tried to process everything she had told me. Elowen wasn't just Dean's ex-wife who had made some bad choices. She was a predator who had specifically targeted my family because she saw us as ideal victims. I thought about calling Dean immediately, but decided to wait until Tommy woke up from his nap. This news could wait a few hours, and I wanted to enjoy the peace of the afternoon while it lasted. When Tommy finally stirred, I went to his room and found him standing in his crib, hair tousled and cheeks pink with sleep. "Gamma Daffy," he said with a sleepy smile, reaching his arms up to me. As I lifted him out of the crib and held his warm little body against my chest, I thought about the choice Patricia was asking us to make. We could pursue additional charges against Elowen, drag this whole nightmare out for months or years longer, or we could accept that justice had been served well enough and focus on building our new life together. "What do you think, little man?" I whispered into Tommy's soft hair. "Should we keep fighting the bad guys, or should we just concentrate on being happy?" Tommy looked up at me with his father's dark eyes and giggled. "Happy," he said clearly, as if he had understood every word. And just like that, I knew what my answer would be when Dean asked for my opinion. We had already won the only victory that truly mattered. We had found each other again, and we had Tommy. Elowen would serve her time and fade into the background of our lives like a bad dream. The future stretched ahead of us, bright and full of possibility. There would be birthday parties and bedtime stories, family dinners and holiday traditions, all the moments that Elowen had tried to steal from us. She had failed, and we had survived. That evening, as Dean, Tommy, and I shared dinner around my small kitchen table, I looked at the two most important people in my world and felt a peace deeper than I had ever known.